Welcome everyone to Productside's PM Tension Series webinar. Today we are doing part 2, why smart teams sometimes build stupid things. Let's get to our key presenter. I'm proud to introduce myself, Roger Snyder, Principal Consultant and Trainer at Productside. I'm based in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but more proud to present Dean Peters, Principal Consultant and Trainer based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Say hi to everyone, Dean.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Hey, put in some chat comments where you're from.
Absolutely. Yep. So as we're gathering, we're going to let folks kind of join over the next 20, 30 seconds. Fonda is based in Chicago. Hopefully it's warming up there at last. Got someone
Oh, you
from
got
your
someone from down the
state.
street in Cary,
Yes,
in the
exactly.
containment area.
I thought you lived at the peak of living.
I am. I'm in the peak of the apex. Cary is right next door.
All right.
All right, well, maybe do some more housekeeping here.
Excellent. Let's do it. All right, so for those of you who are not familiar with Product Side, we have been in the business of improving the product management profession for over 25 years, and we are focused on outcomes, not just delivering great training and support in consulting services, but making sure that it makes a difference, that it creates an outcome with our clients and with our individual students. They come away more effective in the craft of product management. So we focus on helping you transform. When we do enterprise work, we are particularly proud of the fact that we tailor it for the context of those particular clients. And all of our consultants and trainers are experts in the field. And more importantly, almost, we're invested in your success. We want passionately for you to improve and get better at what you're doing in the field of product management as a result of our help. All right, some more
Now,
housekeeping.
speaking
Yeah,
of giving people help, we want questions, right?
absolutely. We want this to be interactive. So please look at that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Click on it, have it open and ready so that you can ask us questions. And sometimes we will take those questions while we're in the midst of the discussion when it feels like a particularly apropos question for that moment, or we will also reserve some time for Q&A at the end of the session. So don't be surprised if some questions may get held until the end, but we want to hear from you. We want this to be interactive. Our number one question that we receive, so let me answer it right now, is yes, you can watch this webinar later. When you signed up, you were able to provide us with your email address. So we'll send a follow-up email with some helpful links, including a link to this recording. So yes, you will be able to listen to this recording later on after the webinar is complete and share that recording with your friends.
And connect
We
with us.
we believe in the value of community. It's product management is a hard discipline and you can't go it alone. You want to work with others and learn from others. So join us on our LinkedIn group, the Product Side LinkedIn group, where you'll hear from other leaders in the field, understand best practices, be able to share your own questions and issues and get help, and be able to network with your peers. So use that QR code and join us on our LinkedIn Product Side Product Management group.
All right. I think we're ready to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
That's right. Over to you, Dean.
All righty. So first of all, welcome and a little bit of intro, a little bit of a welcome there. I think I've just lost my screen for a second because we just give me 1 second here, Roger. I think we just had a power hit here, and
Oh,
there
no.
we go. Yeah, that's okay. I can share my screen again. So let me share it
Excellent.
again.
Hmm.
So I'm going to share my screen one more time. You should be able to see it now.
Yes.
Yes, what fortuitous timing that we got hit with a spike right then. Okay, today, so we've done the intro, we've done the welcome, and then we're going to talk about some tensions and some tensions we experience as product managers, and in this case, how smart teams sometimes create stupid products. So we're going to first talk about that customer insight gap, because this is the gap that helps create some of those tensions. We're going to talk about the five fatal forces, these unseen influences that go ahead and pry that gap open. We're going to talk about five plays from our playbook to help get out in front and remedy those issues. And of course, we're going to take on some questions and then have some special offers and Q&A. So with that, let's talk about the customer insight gap.
Hmm.
Okay, products don't fail because we ignore customers on purpose. They fail because customer understanding gets crowded out. Let me just translate that. We get so busy with being busy that we crowd out the customer insight. Sometimes we jump straight to the solution. Sometimes we jump straight to the technology. Sometimes we just take a bucket of features. But whatever it is, and we're going to talk about those forces, there's a gap that's there. And I think we've all experienced those gaps. And there's quite a bit of history of those gaps as well. Here are just two of thousands of victims of the customer insight gap here. Uh, Quibi, they were going to create turnstile videos, whatever that means. Yeah, basically, it's so
Short.
went ahead and lit this thing up um, without really talking to any customers. They were confident that this new format would create all sorts of revenue for them. In fact, they got 1.75 billion in investment and blew through that because they didn't connect with their customer base. They basically built the wrong thing the right way and built it beautifully. And then you have Juicero, another fun little disaster. Basically, they built a $400 machine that would you put on your kitchen countertop, which would basically squeeze a bag of juice. There was nothing special about the bag of juice. It was just a bag of juice. And everything was going fine until someone put up a YouTube video, bought one of the bags, and in 30 seconds, she destroyed the company saying, "Who wants $400 just to do this?" And she held up a cup and went, "Quick," and squeezed the juice. And there went the company with all its millions of investment as well.
Hmm.
So, and the thing was, it wasn't that Juicero and Quibi were being stupid, they were just being distracted. Uh, one was being distracted with an idea they thought was going to fly. The other one was being distracted. Well, they're both being distracted with ideas they thought were going to fly. And where one was racing to get onto the market, while the other one was racing to with its marketing. But either one was disconnected from the market reality. So just want to run a survey. Have you been in a situation where you've seen or heard smart teams build stupid products? And we're going to ask a survey here. And we want to see how many of you have had Juiceros and Quibbies in your life, or at least seen them if you've not worked with them. This is a multiple choice test, quiz, not a test, it's a quiz. So you can go ahead and, or not even a quiz, it's a poll. You can go ahead and put in all those things you've seen that have created problems for you, created problems for the organization building the right thing, created problems for the investment or the customer. All right, we're getting some answers here. A few more people are answering. See if we can't get just a few more people. So before I end the polling, Roger, which one do you think it's going to be?
I'm revving for the hippos one, honestly.
All right. Hippos, the rhinos, the zebras. Oh my.
Oh my.
Oh my. All right, let's end the poll and then let's share the results. So, as you
Oh.
can see, oh, we got a pretty well. I know what my people want. Oh my gosh, I
Mm,
worked there. I was like a few jobs ago. I,
yep.
yeah, the person was like, "I've spoken to the customer. I know what they want." They really didn't know what they want, but as a close and then ship first, ask questions later. It was
Hmm.
pretty much a tie with addicted to activities and busy building.
Yeah.
Interesting, we didn't see as many people talking about reveling in the glory of
Right.
past wins.
Hmm.
So just sort of interesting there, but some good poll results there. Let me just get that off screen. Let me just get that off screen. There we go.
Hmm.
Let's talk about five fatal forces that cause this to happen. So the five fatal forces are urgency, authority, legacy bias, confirmation bias, and busy building. And these are forces that can pry open an insight gap slowly, and then all at once. Just, bang it
Mhm.
wide open here. And the first one I want to talk about is urgency. Urgency beating rigor. Basically, we saw that with Quibi. They rushed to launch before validating the core behaviors of the users. They apparently skipped a lot of discovery, and I think they found out the hard way that urgency is just anxiety in a suit. I think we see that with a lot of feature factory type of work. We certainly see that in enterprise work. I would imagine, Roger, you've seen that more than once, where it's just like, we don't have time for this. Just let's get a
Right.
product out the door. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I've lived that more than once, both in startups and in large enterprises, surprisingly enough, where it's just like, we don't have time for this. Let's just get something out there and get the feedback that way.
Hmm.
And more often than not, it hasn't really yielded the results we want. So that's the first thing that we want to be wary of as a product manager when they're giving you that. They're trying to press on you urgency. Now, we're going to give you some tools to help get around that, but let's go on to the next of our fatal five here. Authority beats evidence. This is where the term HIPPO, highest paid person's opinion, comes from. Or my favorite, the Seagull manager, who swoops in, poops all over a project, and then leaves you to clean up the mess. Roger, I think, didn't you have also have enough? I've
I
got some
do.
stories, but I imagine you
Oh
have an
yeah.
authority
No,
story.
I've got a story about this one as well. I was once working for a company. We were working on apps, a great company that did amazing things with photo technologies. And at one point, the CEO came in on a Monday and sat me down and said, over the weekend, my son was playing with our beta app, and he said we really should do this, this, and this. And what do you think? And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, let me look into that and I'll get back to you. That was my answer at the moment, right?
Right.
But after I walked out of that meeting with the CEO, I started looking for a new job because I knew there was no way, even if I had data, there was no way I was going to win that argument, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
it
Oh
was
yeah. I
it was
mean,
the end. 3 months later, I had a new job.
well, first of all, it's good to hear you got a new job on that. I had that with a Seagull manager who ran up to us and said, hey, I created some code over the weekend. Can you put it in the code base? It solves the problem.
Ooh,
Oh yeah, I've got a whole story about that. How my lead engineer and QA person were about to throw me off the seventh floor if I didn't find a way.
I
But we
can
could talk about
imagine.
another time. Yeah, but yeah, so and I would imagine now there's a lot of vibe coding authority without
Hmm.
evidence going on here.
Right.
Um, Legacy bias. So it's always worked this way. It's always I had a was listening to a situation with a product manager, and she was told go ahead and update this old bank report or this financial report from our legacy system and do it exactly the way it was before. And I said, well, who's using it and why? Because it's never really a good principle to carbon copy something that's several years old
Right.
verbatim, because what got it to where it's at is likely not to get it to where it needs to be. And I mean, I was on the successful side where we beat off the legacy bias as well when we took a product that was on-prem and moved it to SaaS. So I've seen that happen a few times as well, where legacy reports, legacy policies, legacy applications, because it's always been done that way,
Mhm.
where we tend to say, hey, why don't we just carbon copy this and do this again?
Yeah, this one also can lead to relying on data that was good at some point, but then gets stale. And
It's not only data, but it's also a process, right? It's policy
Mhm.
that, I mean, one of my, beefs is policy that goes into place 10 years ago and is never looked at again,
Right.
or coding standards or whatever standards. It's like, it was probably important when it came, when it was brought up. It was probably important for 2 years after that.
Hmm.
But 10 years later, in dog years,
Right.
you've got a new dog by that time.
Hmm.
And so, more than likely. And so my point is that, yeah, may not want to depend on that. So that's one that can sneak up on you pretty benignly. A
Absolutely.
confirmation. Why this? Yeah, it actually says conformation, but actually should say confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is when you cherry pick the data
Hmm.
to validate your opinion. So I would imagine, Roger, a version of confirmation bias would have been that was it that CEO pulled you in with his son's beta, who said, and when you said we have data for that,
Right.
uh, you know, yeah, it's like the data gets cherry picked, and I've seen cherry picked data, and I think that's something that Juicero did as well. They only grabbed the data that sounded good to them.
Well, and the thing I will say on that one is
Yeah.
this is something that it's you as a product manager have to hold yourself to, right?
Yeah.
This is a challenge sometimes that you're passionate, you want this product to succeed. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to look at the data that says this is a bad idea, or look at the data that says it should be slightly different in A or B, right?
Yep.
And be okay with that. And that's a
Yeah.
challenge. Some of these other problems are things that come at you from other forces. Confirmation bias, you need to make sure you're not suffering from
Yeah, I think as product managers, if we were to fall into one of those, it would probably
it.
that
Mhm.
would be the one that probably trips us up the most,
Absolutely.
personally.
Yep.
Busyness beats learning. Uh, I say this to my agile friends without wanting to rile up too many of them, but all too often we equate velocity with value delivery, and
Mhm.
that's just not necessarily true. More often than not, being busy while it feels like we're getting something done or we're doing something valuable, I've seen it lead to a lot of disasters. I remember what working with a group where the chief product officer saying, "Well, we delivered 167 features this quarter." When I was asking how they measured value, and I was like, "Okay, but which one of those features is helping pay the rent, and which one of those features is sort of being a vampire on your resources?" They couldn't tell me. They couldn't tell me because they were just basically counting the number of features. And I think what had started happening there, they got into what they call Goodhart's Law or the Cobra effect, where people in the
Mm,
organization realized that we're being measured on how
right.
busy we are, but what we're getting through. And so a single feature would get split into three really small features to getting this sort of like, well, it was really one feature, but we delivered it in three parts, so we're calling it three. So you
Hmm.
see some manipulation that way here. So
Right. Poor
I don't know.
behaviors. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know of these five fatals, which one of I mean I like your point on confirmation bias being the one. I think urgency over rigor is another one that I've had some personal experience. I don't know. Like I said, you had one with authority. Is there
I
another
did.
one there that sort of comes to mind?
Right. Yeah. I'd love to also hear from the audience if there's anybody who has a
Yeah.
particular story in here
Stories,
has
comments,
has
questions.
caused problems for them in the past, right? You can definitely share stories here.
Exactly.
So, and then also, with respect to, like I said, confirmation bias, you definitely want to avoid that yourself. Some of
Yeah.
these others then require that you use data to help beat back some of these other issues. And we'll talk
Well,
about how do you
yeah,
get
well,
that?
let's talk about using data. All right. Let's
Hmm.
talk about stop, making sure we just don't do everything inside the building. And because I really think these insight gaps, some of these tensions, a lot of them spawn out of the fact that we really don't get outside the building enough, or we don't make enough calls, or we're not talking to enough other human beings, or if we're talking to human beings, it's close friends or colleagues who agree with us. We're not really, I don't know, investing in hearing the bold truth of whether the baby is ugly or not. And I think there's some ways to do that that aren't as painful as we think, that can yield results. And one of the things that we have is from our playbook are 5 plays to help you frame conversations. So we're going to talk about these plays, but the first thing I want to say about any of these plays is whether it's a template, whether it's a canvas, whether it's a framework, whether it's a method, there's no magic behind it other than the conversations it helps you frame and hold with the select audiences here. And it's going to be empathy interviews. It's going to be affinity mapping. It's going to be reframing the mandate. It's going to be storyboarding the problem. It's going to be validating the solutions. But again, none of them are magic. They are forcing functions.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the empathy interview first. I'm not going to read the whole slide, but I'm going to read those 2 lines. Stop asking what and start asking why. I don't know, Roger, when you teach empathy interview, when I teach it, the first thing I say is the worst question I've ever seen asked an empathy interview is, what features do you like?
Oh man, right. No, that's a killer. That's going to take you down the wrong direction.
Well, it puts you, oh, you're in a support call. You're no longer in an interview with a client,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, I would imagine you have some other favorites that you've seen.
Oh, well, I start out on the positive front of to your point of the second question. Tell
Right.
me about why you are using my product.
Right, right. I talk about it like, the story of my Greek grandmother who could tell the future, my Yaya Maria,
Right.
who could tell the future. And all she was
Mm-hmm.
really doing was listening to other people saying, I understand you've got some problems here, or I understand you've got some pain here. Tell me a little about it. And
Mm-hmm.
when was the last time you heard it happen? When was the last time it happened? How'd that make you feel? How often did that happen? Do you
Right.
do anything right now to cope with it? And it's just these leading questions and getting that other person to, to spill the tea, to tell the story here. And so we've got this template here that we use to help do this. So you're not just reading through a script, but you're
Mm-hmm.
framing a conversation. And it's a conversation of, hey, walk me through a day in the life. Tell me your story. And so my grandmother would sit there and someone would be, telling their story. She'd just look in the little, being Greek, you drink your coffee down to the grounds, the Turkish coffee, look into the bottom of the cup and say, let me tell you your future now by looking at your coffee grounds. Had nothing to do with the coffee grounds, just like it has nothing to do with the template. It was a matter of listening to understand,
Right.
asking not leading questions, but guiding questions in terms of tell me your story. Tell me more about your story. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
even more about your story and feelings and get around it. And I think another component that we don't do is we don't bring somebody along to capture what we hear, the things that we hear in terms of the jobs they're trying to accomplish, the problems they're up against, what fears they have, what the things that they're talking about here, or what they're aspiring to. So
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
for me, this is why I find this template helpful because I've seen people who just grab a script, read the script to the point where they're not making any eye contact
Right.
or
Right.
looking down and just
Right.
rattling up. And it sounds like an interrogation to me. So I
Well,
don't know
that's
if
why
you've
we
had
call
that
it
experience.
an
Yeah.
empathy interview, right? You
Yes.
definitely want to get into a friendly conversation where you can become empathetic about what their needs are, really feel
Right.
for that. We actually emphasize, you notice the lower right box, and this is the one that my students in class often struggle with, is feels appears. It
Right.
isn't just about the jobs and the problems and the desired outcomes. Those are all crucial. Don't get me wrong. But the feels part is so important. You want to tap into when they get excited or they get really frustrated. Those are the moments that matter. And
Right.
that's what you got to
Watch their eye.
retain.
Do their eyes get wide when they talk? Do they start you waving their hands around? Does spit start to fly? All right.
Yep.
Do they get red? I mean, do they cross their arms in the middle of it and sort of close
Hmm.
up? I keep up, don't, it's not just what they say, it's how they're delivering it as well. I know it's hard sometimes, especially, with Zooms and Teams, that it's hard to pick that up. It's going to be, harder to pick up the nuance. But one of the fears I see is with some of these, awesome AI transcription notes is we're ignoring some of the
Right.
physical tells
Hmm.
that can tell us so much about the person's
Absolutely.
delivery or
That's
the
the point.
tone of voice.
Hmm.
Did their voice go higher? Did it go lower? Again, did they start scribbling? Did they start tapping? Did they have some nervous behavior you observed there? Because that is important too. And that's why I'd like another person, not just one of these AI assistants in the room.
Right.
And even go back and watch the video saying, oh, I think that person sort of sat up straight when we were
Hmm.
talking about that. So either and again, so those things are tells there. So
Absolutely.
use this canvas to help you frame a Yaya Maria type conversation about,
Hmm.
I hear you, dear, I hear you have problems. Can you tell me a little bit about it? How does it make you feel? How often does this happen? This sounds really frustrating. What do you do to get around it now? Those type of questions here are going to give you much more about the customer need.
Absolutely.
Now, once you got all that qualitative data,
Hmm.
we should affinity map it, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So if someone, the problem is with this is that we want to affinity map what we heard, what they said to us, what we perceived they felt, what they
Mhm.
were saying to us. We want to sit there and categorize that around the jobs they're trying to get done, the pains they're facing, and what sort of gains they're trying to get out of it. What we're really trying to do is get below the solution speak, which is the only language they often know. When
Right.
they say give me a chatbot, it's not they're trying to be not trying to be irritating or beat us up or anything like that. What they're really trying to do is articulate some of these pains, gains, and jobs to be done. And
Mhm.
there's definitely a way to do that. What I like to do is go ahead and, in fact, I'm going to show you how I do that. So, whoops, wrong screen here. So, for example, here's our what do you call it? The pains, gains, and jobs to be done that we captured. And I basically took a screenshot of the pains, gains, and jobs to be done, and I asked it just to be converted into Markdown. And then from Markdown, I was able to give it a give Copilot a picture. So I gave it a picture of the
Mhm.
conversation canvas. I gave it a picture of the jobs to be done customer circle. And I told it, hey, based off of this, just go ahead and give me some 7-word ASCII only pains, gains, and jobs to be done. So I could have a conversation with my team where maybe I copy these, and maybe while we're in Mural or Miro, I now I don't use these as a source of truth, Roger. I use them to start conversations,
Right.
but now I've pre-populated the board with pains
For the pains.
based
Yeah.
off of what we heard,
Hmm.
based off
Absolutely.
of what we observed, based off of what we saw here. So when you start having this conversation, now you can, and again, all I did was took a picture of the canvas and said, break this down into text. And then I gave it a picture of this mural board and said, go ahead and break this down further. So we have the tools to do this and make this relatively easy. And in fact, you can do this with any of the templates we have there. Is just take snapshots of them that are
Right.
populated. Use your generative AI to go ahead and flesh out the text, and then go ahead and ask it questions like, could you affinity map it? And now that we have it in 3 categories, we have pains, gains, and jobs to be done. And that gives us an advantage because
Well, I
now we
want to
can
pause on
yeah,
that for just a moment because
yeah,
we're talking about good times to use AI. Like
yep,
if you had 5 of these interviews, right? And you would
yep,
grab all 5 of those and have the AI put together for you the ones that rise to the top, the recurring themes in all three
yeah,
dimensions. But there's times where AI is not as valuable, right? The actual interview itself, you want to be conducting that. You want to be tapping in. You're taking the notes. You're not just
yep,
relying on your note taker. You're taking the notes, especially about those emotions and all those tells that you were talking about earlier, Dean, right? So
yep,
AI is powerful and awesome, but it's not the tool for everything. So
right.
I hope you're seeing that we're asking you to use AI in certain circumstances and also know when not to use AI.
And I think we got a good question here that just came in. Are affinity maps only used with the empathy interview as output? No. I
No.
mean, if you
Mhm.
have other qualitative streams of data, I
Right.
think Roger, you're about to give an example,
Well, yeah. So if you've got a mix of data as well, right? Affinity
right?
mapping can be very powerful when you pull together some qualitative research and some quantitative research and bring
Yep,
them together and see where there are, in fact, these areas of affinity. Oh, look, as a result of doing this qualitative research, we then ask these survey questions, and we're now seeing whether or not those bind together well or no. Actually, sometimes, again, to the confirmation bias conversation earlier, we thought we had a handle on something, but the survey data says no. And the affinity mapping will help bring that together. It will point out to you where, okay, we got a cluster here of common ideas, and they are what
hmm,
we thought matched in our qualitative research, or we have a cluster of ideas that aren't matching at all. But the affinity mapping
right.
will bring that to light.
Yeah, I like how you put that a lot there. And so yeah, you can use the affinity map. So it doesn't have to use it this way. And in fact, you can use these tools in any order you want. This was just we've done this for the sake of this conversation, including reframing the mandate. Because
Hmm.
what happens? What happens when we find that top pain, that top gain, that top job to be done? Well, quite often, Roger, I've seen we don't articulate it very well.
Right.
I've seen situations where a high level executive has asked a product manager, what problem are you solving? And what do you
Mhm.
suppose that product manager with a technical background did?
Yeah. Oh man,
They
they
went
went
and
tech, didn't they?
and described, well, we're using a NLP here. We got Elastic set up here. And then we got this nice, Kubernetes thing going here. And it's probably the last time that executives asked them about anything,
Mm,
as opposed to, do you have a crisp way of articulating who has the problem? What problem are they trying to solve for?
mhm.
What's getting in their way? What's the root cause here? And how does that make them feel? Because it makes them feel as part of that opportunity. So
Right.
again, here is a forcing function through a canvas. Now,
Hmm.
you could take those pains, gains, and jobs to be done, stack rank them, vote on them, and from them, it wouldn't be hard to generate this or even just write this out. This is short enough that I suggest writing it out and then using AI to help wordsmith it. But sit down with those pains, gains, and jobs, pick the top ones, and then articulate it. Articulate it from the viewpoint of the user with 3 or 4 points.
Hmm.
List what they care about. Put in the buts. But this happens and that happens, and it's driving me nuts.
Right.
And we think we understand why it's happening here.
Hmm.
Also, don't cheat on the context and constraints. What is the backstory? What are some of the guardrails and guidelines this person is up against? Are they, for example, this is an example of somebody who's in HR with the healthcare.
Hmm.
So they're not only in a highly regulated industry, they're also in a legally, what would you call it, legally charged part of
Charged,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, legally charged about the best way. So not am I dealing with the all the constraints that something like the healthcare brings in times of compliance. Someone in HR also has a lot of legal things they have to worry about. And if it's a large company across many states in the union or states and
Hmm.
countries, yeah, you multiply that times 50 states and however many countries and however many.
Right.
So you can imagine a person here could feel quite frustrated, but it helps paint the picture of what problem we're solving from. This is a very portable statement. And it's actually a statement that's really good to sit there and pause for a second and say, is this orange really worth the squeeze?
Right. Now is the
You
good
know,
time to figure
now
it
is a
that
good
out.
time to have a
Hmm.
conversation. Say, where did you come by? Oh, I interviewed 5 or 6 people, and this is what kept coming up.
Hmm.
We did that. We ran the affinity maps on there. The data just kept coming up the same. We ran some of our analytics. We took some customer feedback coming in from our live chat or from our customer support.
Support,
So
yeah.
again, you just as you said, Roger, we can take qualitative and quantitative data from a bunch of sources, and just like the question we got on, the question we got coming up in the chat, is this only happening after the interview? No. So again, you can derive this from a variety of sources here.
And on that framing the problem, I think it's another conversation piece. Once
Yeah.
you feel good about it, then test it with some other folks, right? And make sure that in fact, yes, that makes a lot of sense.
I like how you said test that with other folks, because one of the other ways we get around these five fatals is with validation testing.
Mhm.
So why don't you sit there and so we start thinking about the problem and the solution? Can we go ahead and help socialize it and help socialize either the solution or the problem with a storyboard?
Mhm.
And I could talk about a storyboard, but I'd rather show you what I did with a storyboard here.
Mhm.
So again, working in Copilot, I went ahead and after we did the pains, gains, and jobs to be done, I took this picture. That's all I did and said, hey, based on this picture, based on the pains, gains, and jobs to be done, can you give me the story arc in text? And we saw the story arc roll in here. The hero, the pain, the disaster. Now, like, oh, Dean, big deal. I've got, the story arc there. But Copilot, M365 Copilot has a create function, which helps you draw the picture.
Mhm.
It has a create function, which you can actually then create an explainer video that's narrated and goes through your 6 frames of the video here. I don't know, should I show that video? I'd have to turn on my sound for that. So this created a 1 minute, 46-second video
Hmm.
based just on the narrative. You can see here's the narrative here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's a lot of things you can do with that to help socialize that.
Hmm.
I don't know.
And now you could take that socialization out of the building as well, right?
Yeah.
And retest with real people to see whether or not it grabs their attention and says, yes, that is my problem. And yes, that elixir would help me do a better job.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. All righty. And then we get to validating our solutions here. And this is where, for example, we're going, not going, instead of building it, because we've seen this happen. I think it was, is it, I think it's Jeff Gothelf or Jeff Patton. I think it's Jeff Patton who says the most expensive
Jeff
way
Patton.
to validate your product is to, how do you
Build,
say it, fully
build
build it.
production code.
Yeah,
Yeah.
full production code.
Hmm.
That's a very, very expensive play to make. And now that we have things like vibe coding, now that we have things like prototyping, now that we have the ability to run tiny acts of discovery, and you notice the order, Roger, I talked about them. I say, look, we want to talk about tiny acts of discovery first, then go to your prototype, then think about maybe, you shouldn't even say a full build or an initial build here. And this template I want to camp out on for just a second because
Please.
this one drives me a little crazy because we don't tend to create falsifiable hypotheses
Mm.
with their ideas.
Right. That's an
If you've
interesting
been
point.
around any data scientist or anyone with us who's taken a stats class, or even someone who's like, in the area of life sciences, that falsifiable hypotheses means it can be disproven. So we're not
Mhm.
stacking the deck with it.
Right.
And it actually doesn't start with the hypotheses. First, it starts of taking inventory of what you do know, and then moving over and having a really heart-to-heart talk about what you don't know.
Hmm. That's very
And
important.
then you rank them on this 2 by 2,
Mhm.
because what you're trying to do is say, like, those items that have a huge impact and we have no clue how they work, those are the ones we want to take on more than the others, because you can't run all the experiments here.
Right.
You can't run all the experiments here. Um, so we want to rank them. And then for our top 2 or 3, we want to write them as a hypothesis. And I think this gets into the question that Adam is asking. How do you guard against positive bias for storytelling to validate the pains, gains, and jobs to be done?
Hmm.
So I
Yep.
think with the storytelling, probably you're not going to validate that as much. But here, Adam, is where you're going to actually suss that out. Here is where you're actually going to interrogate the assumptions. We use the storyboard to socialize the story, to start our stories with why. If we have a solution, it's about starting with why as opposed to starting with the technology. So the storyboarding becomes a very valuable tool in getting feedback fast when you present that to customers. What you're looking for is somebody saying, yes, that story sounds just like me. We use storyboarding over at Seven Lakes. We did explainer videos. We had a series, and it was Manny. Who was it? It was Manny. It was Martin and Marcia.
That's not
Eh.
confusing.
That was confusing. Well, again, one of them was going out in the field, one of them was dispatching, and one of them was doing the accounting.
Got it.
But
I
yeah, but
remember
here's the
Manny.
thing. Here's the thing. I got emails. I got a couple emails that said, I think we have a Manny problem. They were
Hmm.
referring to the persona by name.
That's awesome.
So maybe there was some bias in there because we thought that was the answer in the story, and that's okay. Because think about how cheap a storyboard is.
Hmm.
This
Yeah, you
is
just
again,
showed
this is
building
a
one.
very inexpensive test.
Hmm.
I can show you the storyboard here. I can maybe do the explainer video and send it out to you. It takes that person all 3 minutes, and they either come back with, yeah, that's me, or I have no clue what you're talking about. But either way, you have a signal. So for the storyboarding, there's probably going to be some of your own bias there. And what you're using the storyboard is to basically say, is socialize with other people who are going to say, not really my story, or I don't understand the story, or the story doesn't resonate with me. However, at some point, you do need to root out that bias. And this is where the tiny acts of discovery comes in,
Right.
because this is where you interrogate these ideas. This is where you go ahead and just not only put them in a hypothesis here, but then you write some of these tiny acts of discovery that you run.
Mm-hmm.
And you're running these to capture both qualitative and quantitative data. And it's not always a feasibility play. Often, when people run a tiny act of discovery, they think, oh, okay, well, we'll make sure we have the right database. Okay, we'll make sure we have the right technology. And that's not bad. Those are good. But are we also looking for valuable to the customer? And I mean valuable enough that they would pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And is it a viable business model for us?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we can run some tiny acts of discovery. For example, I was told with a patient finder problem by a lot of experts that this was going to be illegal, that you can't do this, that it's against the law, you should stop doing this. And I finally had enough and set up a half-hour time with the people in legal and compliance in the company I worked at. The meeting only took 15 minutes because I did a lot of prep work and pre-read, because when you're talking to lawyers, you do better when you do that. And basically, the conversation was pretty one-sided. It's the lawyer and the person in compliance going, "Are you doing this? No. You doing this? Yes. You do." Just going through a checklist and said, "All right, you're doing the right things, and you're not doing the things you're not supposed to. You're not doing the right things." How they said it. Make sure you keep it that way.
Right.
And when you get this, by the way, you need to check with this group, and you have to file over here. Okay. And I walked back and was like, so. It took me maybe 2 hours to put together the pre-read information and put all the ducks in a row.
Good.
The meeting was 2.5 hours. That's an inexpensive test,
Mm-hmm.
as
Right.
opposed to putting it out in the wild. And if I did do something illegal, finding myself in a deposition, and even worse, maybe a paid for vacation at Club Fed.
Right.
So,
Definitely not what you
so
want. I want
yeah,
to point
not
out
what we
one thing
want.
to Adam's question here. That first one, by achieving a 60% adoption rate of the self-service feature. So you're now setting an objective number that probably is important for both validating the customer cares about it, but also that it's going to be valuable enough for your business to be profitable. And
Right.
now it's an objective number. And Adam, if you don't hit that number, that's when you've got to step back and say, hang on, what are we
Yeah.
doing? Right? If
Y-
your
y-
adoption rate is 30%, and you're just not going to make money off of it, or customers aren't finding it valuable, that's the thing that you then can objectively decide what to do next.
And I like putting markers in the ground because even especially, and I like putting ones a little bit aggressive because what I really want is to look at the delta. Yeah, we said we're going for 60. We got 40%.
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm comfortable enough with that to move forward with maybe some pivot, but for that pivot, I need to understand why we didn't hit that other 20% first.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a place and an avenue where you can start exploring that as well. All righty. Any other thoughts there? Any sort of tiny acts of discovery you're familiar with?
Oh, I mean, again, you've covered some of the major ones, especially because they're cheap and fast, right? Storyboarding, explainer videos, and we come like even just 5 years ago, those were not that hard to build, but now they are so much easier to build that
Right, right.
it's like you have no excuse now, right? The number one thing I hear from my students, Dean, is
Yeah,
we don't have time for discovery, right? You already talked about that urgency fatal problem,
right.
right? We don't have time for discovery. You do. And
Yeah.
more than ever, you have time for discovery now so that you are able to validate ideas before you spend a ton of time and money building something nobody wants.
Well,
And
and
that's what we're trying to avoid.
it's not that hard. I mean, hopefully the sound's working here.
A bustling healthcare office where every responsibility
Can you
feels
hear?
critical.
Yep.
Now, step into Henry's shoes, a skilled HR specialist who starts each day with purpose and professionalism, managing mountains of paperwork and digital files that never seem to shrink.
So
But in the next breath, those
we
papers
generated
multiply.
this.
Forms pile up. Endless spreadsheets stretch across his desk. The weight of repetitive, manual HR tasks grows heavier with every passing moment. Frustration sets in, stress pinching his brow, making even the smallest request feel monumental. Suddenly, The chaos
Here's
explodes.
what I call the oh
Documents
crap
topple,
moment.
alarms ring in the periphery, and compliance worries sharpen. Henry finds himself buried beneath the outpouring, his efforts divided, his energy depleted. Burnout becomes all too real, and the risks too great to ignore.
All right, so I think I've done enough to get the point across there.
Right.
All I did was take what our interview information, punch it into Affinity, map it in the Pains Gains jobs be done, framed it in the problem statement, took that and framed that into a 6-panel storyboard, and was able to create this explainer video. I was able to create a version of it. Let's see, create it in ChatGPT. Same process, and I was able to create a pretty nice, what would you call it, storyboard handout. And then, let's see, where else? Oh, in Google Gemini, I took the same process and vibe coded. I just basically took it and it wrote the code. So what you do is in Gemini, you turn it on to the pro thinking mode as opposed to fast mode. You kick on the canvas and you tell it. All I said was I gave it all that background and said, create for me an HTML5 single page application that actually works. So I've actually got a working prototype that I was able just to generate. I mean, you could do it in Claude Code. I've done it there as well. You can do it in the Canvas and ChatGPT. You can do it with Codex. But now you have information here that actually can give you a working prototype so you can touch and feel what the future might look like.
Right.
And that all happened this morning within minutes. So when I keep hearing we don't have time, my point is I think that time has been pretty well compressed for us. And I think that gets us, and I think we got some questions coming in. Should we answer them now or should we go on?
They've been questions kind of on a side topics, and I've been answering them. So those.
Okay. All right, cool. Here's the point. Your customer insight gap is not going to close itself. And all this advice about product managers saying no, I'm getting a little bit frustrated with that because that's career limiting. All right. I mean, we can't say yes to everything, but telling someone, well, if you can't say yes, then the other thing you got to do, I would suggest that Seagull manager who came in, swooped in with that code, tell you the way we play that, Roger. Hey, Jake, that's really good. Person's name wasn't really Jake, but we're going to go with Jake for now.
Good, thank you.
Yes, right? So, yes. Jake, glad you came in with that. Now, this person had been with the company for 16, 17 years, had come up from an intern and was now the, what do you call it, head VP of technology. And when here we were working on this workflow system, this agent system, decided to write code over the weekend and gift us this code. This wasn't recent, so the whole vibe coding sort of thing has happened before it became a thing. And I remember just the engineer and the QA person standing behind this person looking at me like, stop, don't do this. And I said, hey, Jake, that's really good. Would you mind if we run it through our automated testing? So rather than sit there and say no, I was able to sit there and say, why don't we run through our automated testing? Let's see what sort of falls out. Now, I knew this thing was going to fail. But in the middle of that code, there was a hidden gem with something that my team and I had especially me had overlooked. So I was able to go back and say, Jake, can't use your code, but we missed this entire thing here. So we are going to bake that in and we're going to name the function after you. Okay. Said no without saying no.
Right.
So
exactly. Especially
and a lot of it was validated learning. We just sat there and ran it through the test here. We invited evidence into the room. The market reality.
Hey, Dean, before you keep going, let me answer. There's another anonymous attendee question, which is a great one. You keep talking about software products. I don't manage a software product. How does this apply to me?
So let's say if you're doing it, so I don't know if this person's doing a service or a manufactured product, but I'm going to go with manufactured for now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of prototyping and prototyping going on with 3D printing, simulations, synthetic data, some what they call breadboarding type of experiments, what do you call boxing experiments. So there's all sorts of ways if you're working with physical products, to go ahead and test that. So that's another way you can take these techniques as well. You're still talking to human beings. You're still talking. you're still framing the pains, gains, and jobs to be done.
Right.
You would
Absolutely.
still create a storyboard about their story.
Exactly.
You know, you're
Yes.
still validating it. So I understand that this has sort of a software sort of taste to it, but as we're talking to human beings about what problems they have and what problems we're solving for them, as we're unpacking those pains, gains, and jobs to be done, as we're storyboarding it and framing their problem, I think that's going to be product agnostic, whether it's a physical or a software product.
Completely agree. So like storyboarding and explainer videos, they are
Yeah.
equally valuable no matter what kind of product or service that you're offering. In
I,
fact, like Caterpillar, right? The
yeah.
manufacturer of those great big yellow things that we love that dig in the dirt, they do an amazing job with explainer videos. And
The,
and so check them out on YouTube, right?
I
They
know
are
I know of a manufacturer that in the EU who has a lot of IoT that they're working with right now. And I said, "Do you understand what the what the API packet looks like, or do you understand what the time series data looks like?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you have a document?" "Yes." We use generative AI to generate about 10,000 time series data, and then we were able to run different analysis on that through three different simulations to
Mhm.
get what they wanted to get on a dashboard. So here was a physical product that we didn't have to capture signals with. We were able to
Right,
go ahead using synthetic data. Same thing with patient records. Same. So there's different ways you can do this.
right, absolutely. All right.
All right, here's your cheat sheet, folks. So when urgency hits the room, say, can you give me a few days to talk to some people? When the hippo comes rolling in, you may want to do some jobs to be done mapping there on their pains, gains, and jobs to be done. Legacy bias, reframe that problem. Busy building, meet it with the story boarding. Confirmation bias, unpack that and eviscerate it and stomp it dead with tiny acts of discovery.
Eviscerated. I like
I
it.
think we got another poll.
Yes, we do.
Starting today, people, what will you do differently? So if Robin can get the poll up, we can get this. There it is. There's the poll. All right. So, are you going to practice empathy over urgency? Or are you going to map solution speak to problem statements? Are you going to reframe problems with clarity? Are you going to socialize with storytelling? Or are you going to validate tiny acts of discovery? And with before you do the vibe prototyping.
Mhm. Let's see how people are
And
gonna.
it's a multiple choice question, folks. So you can play more than one of these cards.
Hmm.
All righty.
I'm not seeing the vote tallies, Gene, so you'll have to call it.
I'm seeing them. That's all right. We're going to,
Yeah,
they're not, they're, I'm going to give it about another 30 seconds. I'm going to
yeah,
call it.
please do. And we got a question for. There's another question, but I want to hold it for
Yes.
Q and A at the end. We'll get that question for
Excellent.
you in the end.
Yep. And I think I left you enough time this time.
Yep, we got it.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to end the poll. We're going to see what happens. There's the end of poll. I'm going to share the poll results. Come on, mouse. Of course, my mouse isn't playing nice here, so I want to share the results. Here we go. There we go, sharing the results.
Nice.
Storytelling.
Yay.
Wow, storytelling
Love it.
popular.
Mm-hmm.
Reframe the problem with clarity. Now, I wasn't thinking. Now, I was thinking it was going to be down here with Tiny X Discovery. That's
Yeah.
interesting here.
No,
Empathy
no, I
over.
think reframing is valuable though. That's awesome.
I know I don't disagree with that. Excellent job. Excellent job here. Cool. Well, I don't want to share the results. Stop it. I keep trying to take it off my screen and it keeps putting it back on my screen.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We,
Here's your part, Roger. And
all
let me know
right.
when to switch the
And
slides
some of
up.
these actually help answer some of the questions. So the very first question, because people in the chat were asking, hey, how do I get a hold of these templates? Here's how you get a hold of some of the templates, right? So the framing the problem template is available. Just scan that QR code and you can grab that one and or use the links that are now in the chat. And the voice of the customer workbook will provide you with some of these templates as well. Now, some people were asking about prioritization techniques, a little bit different, and that's in our larger product side playbook. So go to productside.com to be able to grab that one as well. We've got training coming up, right, Dean?
Yes, we do.
All right, in-person training in London. So if you're over across the pond in Europe or in London, go check out Tom Evans, who will be hosting Optimal Product Management, our full 3-day course on the full practice of product management. It will cover all of the techniques that you heard a little bit about today, and he'll be live in April. We've got some other
And if you
training.
go to that training, I promise not to do any British accents for 4 months. How's that? Maybe 6. All right. We got even more training.
That's right.
Well,
We got a webinar coming up.
we got more webinars. Oh, March 11th.
Yes, exactly. So coming up next, early March, part three of our PM Tension series. So far, you've heard about the challenges of roles and responsibilities. Today, we talked about how to avoid building stupid things. And in part three, we'll talk about how you can, why speed without discipline can break your product team. So a
Oh,
mixture of moving quickly, but in a disciplined approach. That's coming
yeah.
up next. So check it out on March 11th. And yes, more courses coming up. Just the way the stones fell, Dean is on a run right now. He'll be
Yes.
available to you in March for both optimal product management, our full 3-day course, and AI product management, a great
Yeah, and we got
course.
agents happening in that training.
That's right. We
Yes,
will
at
have
the
agents
AI
happening in
training,
that
you
training.
got agents,
Yep,
and some of the stuff we showed you with generative AI is going to be in that optimal product management training as well. So you get the
hmm
templates, you get the prompts, yeah, and you get some stories on the side as well.
absolutely. So check out, use that QR code to be able to see our upcoming training. Somebody had asked actually about that in the beginning of, hey, how can I get trained? How can I become certified? The optimal product management course is your key to becoming a certified product manager. All right.
Q&A.
Q&A. All right. So, another question. How can you help mature a legacy culture which relies more on I know what needs to be done? Remember that one?
Yeah,
Despite, okay, inviting them through the discovery process, identifying the problems, and even showing them actual validated data from the customers and users.
I've lived that experience.
Oh, and Dean, if you
And
could stop presenting.
oh yeah, sure, glad to.
That's
I've lived that experience, Roger,
mm,
where it's just like no
so have
matter how
I.
much data, they sort of
Yep.
scoff at it. Um, the best thing you can do at that point, like I said, you're not going to win all these battles. If you're a product manager, you could have run all these steps, you could have done it flawlessly, you could have done everything right, and you still might find up working with leadership who just wants to push in the direction they want to push.
Right.
Uh, and the best that we can do then is make the best of that situation. If they're dead set on it, despite the data, then the best thing you can do is use some of these techniques to see how much you can try to make these legacy things work in a current context. So
Yeah.
take some of these tools and say like, all right, don't like where we're going with this. I don't agree with where we're going with this, but we're going to go this way. These things were probably popular, or these things were probably useful, or these things probably needed to happen because they happened 10 or 15 years ago. What information can I collect now that will help me create the best version of that based off legacy experiment as experience as possible?
I have
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
two other thoughts as well on this, right? Okay, one is start getting agreement at least with those executives of what matters to the business. If you can
yeah,
get a couple of business metric agreements, so you know what business outcomes matter to them, and then just start measuring them with this, I know what to be done, whatever's on the current roadmap, and see whether or not you're actually achieving the goals that you are setting out for. If not, that opens up the conversation to alternatives. The second thing that I would also point out is talk about opportunity cost, right?
right.
Hey,
Yeah,
our data
absolutely,
says we
absolutely.
should be doing this, and you want to go this way. Fine, big boss, hippo, whatever their name is, right? Pointy haired boss. Um, we'll go the direction you want to go, but here are the opportunities that I want to make sure we all understand we are foregoing. Here are the opportunities that the data says we should be pursuing, and you're making that choice. Are we all agreed? Fine.
Mm.
Now I will disagree and
Yeah,
commit and go do it. But you've
yeah.
at least had your day in court and you've shown the opportunity cost.
Yeah, I like that too, as well as show the costs. Again, do your research, do your homework on it, keep a decision log as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and again, not all organizations are as functional as we'd like them to be. I know
Right.
Roger and I have had to provide consulting and been the truth tellers in some of those organizations. So we get it. We understand why it's difficult here. So the best thing you can do is surround yourself with evidence, which pretty much what this conversation was.
Mhm.
And then it's in the how you pitch it, how you present it. I think Roger, you did a really good job on, all right, rather than just sitting there and saying you're wrong, I have the data,
Right.
saying like, can we
Okay.
measure the opportunities here? Can we put a measurement? Can we put a time box on it? See if there's anything you can get sort of traction on that as well.
Yeah.
So
Last
about the
last thing
best
I'll
we can
say
do.
there is, can you carve out one small thing
Yeah.
and pilot one small thing and show
Yeah.
that a data-driven approach is leading to a better outcome in that one small thing. Be
The
patient with legacy.
land
Yeah.
and expand play. Yeah. Can
Yeah.
we just do this for a month? Can we just do this for a short period of time to just to show you that there's a possible better way of working here, with just one team? You can go along with that. And I think we're at two. I think we're
We
at the
are.
top of
Well,
the hour.
thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you got a lot out of today's webinar. Thank you, Dean, for a fantastic overview of these 5 techniques to get over some of the challenges that product managers face. I think this is awesome.
Yep. All right, all. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.